started, just want to make sure everyone got their material. You need this packet. You need these cards clipped together. So Isaiah has some if anybody needs. Also need a pencil. Mr. Werenko assures me this is voluntary. Some of us are, skilled at drawing, and some of us are not skilled in other areas. I'm not drawing. We have other talent, and not a bit of that. But anyway, it's voluntary, but it'd be fun to participate. It's going to be an interactive workshop. So I'm going to introduce him. John B. Werenko is a graduate of the College of Fine Arts at the University of New Mexico with an MFA degree. He also holds an MA degree in art and a bachelor degree from the same college. His first undergraduate degree was in English from Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mr. Werenko also did postgraduate studies in arts administration at the Stern School of Business, the College of Education, and the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. He was an assistant dean, director of admissions, and professor at the Heron School of Art of Indiana University at the Indianapolis campus, where he was an active member of the National Association of Schools of Art National Association of Schools of Art and Design, serving on accreditation panels for art schools and art departments in the United States. He was a member of the College of Art Association. He is the author, editor, and compiler of the first Guide to American Schools published by G.K. Hall of Boston, Massachusetts, and Penguin Books of New York and London, UK. After retiring as executive director of the Northern New Mexico Regional Art Center, Mr. Werenko moved to Lubbock, Texas to be near family and to continue his career as an artist, illustrator, and author. He is currently a member of the Capwrock Writers and Illustrators Alliance, who is sponsoring the seminar workshop. The Lubbock Garden Art Center is hosting an exhibition of his fine art, which you see all around you. Sorry, I lost my place now. Hosting an exhibition of his fine art, illustrations, and publications in conjunction with this seminar. So please join me in welcoming John Werenko.
Thank you. Just to start off a little bit with a little bit of humor, I'm going to take this off in a second, but this is my Mr. Rogers sweater. It gives me a little respectability when I talk to a group. So the other thing is that when you're a professor, you have to have a coffee mug. There's no getting around it. If you're a professor, you need a coffee mug. And this coffee mug is from the Getty Museum of Antiquities in Los Angeles. It's called A Brief History of Western Art. It's 20,000 years of art on a coffee mug. And I drink out of it every morning. The other coffee mug that's special to me is actually a gift from my daughter, Christina, and she did a copy of one of my paintings on a coffee mug with my signature on the side. So this is the other coffee mug that means a lot to me. So I'm going to, because it's a little bit warm in here, but the sweater, I'm going to take it off and then roll up my sleeves, because when I do things, I roll up my sleeves. I don't feel comfortable with the sleeves being down. It's sort of a sign that I'm actually going to do some work. You know, in spite of the fact that sometimes people say about teachers that teachers they teach, they don't do anything, they just teach. So before I start this seminar, there are a number of people that I really want to thank for making this all possible today. I'd like to acknowledge a number of these people. My daughter, obviously, Christina Kerr, and her husband, my son-in-law, Cliff Kerr, and my grandson, Cooper. They've been invaluable in supporting me since I moved here to, being there for me here in Texas when I moved from New Mexico. And also, this past Tuesday, they helped me hang this show. Now, when I ran community art centers, I ran galleries, and I would put on 10 exhibitions a year, about every 5 weeks. And I tried to have a preparator and a gallery director help me. It takes a lot of work to properly hang a show and have it look good. So thank you very much, Chris and Cliff and Cooper, for doing a masterful job. It was not easy. I also want to thank D.K. Kerr and K.J. Waters and Kim Harris of the Capwrock Writers and Illustrators Alliance for making this possible for me today. You heard Kim do the introduction for me, which I really appreciate. But D.K. Kerr was president last year, and she had me come last September to do a personal sort of profile for 15 minutes. After that, D.K. Kerr said, and K.J. Waters said to me, would you like to do a full presentation? I said, sure. So at that point, I went to the director here of this the Garden Arts Center to see if I could do a show in conjunction with the seminar. So Joanna Feminar is director of the Garden Arts Center, and I want to thank her for making the gallery available to me. It's a beautiful gallery. As a matter of fact, all the galleries that I run in my life, they were all been plasterboard, and when you put a nail in after the show, you've got to patch it and you've got to paint it. They have fabric that I would have killed to have in any gallery. It's got like carpeting material, and behind it is like a plywood material. You drive a nail in, you pull it out, and it disappears. It's like, wow, this is fantastic. So I really appreciate this gallery space. Also want to recognize Professor Jorge Morales and his wife Elizabeth, who are here. They're at Texas Tech, and Caroline. They're also at Texas Tech. They're friends of my daughter that I met when I came here, and they've been very supportive of everything that I've been doing in my artwork and so on. As a matter of fact, Jorge is working with me on what started out to be an article, which may end up becoming a book, and part of that is actually here in the walls that you can see, and I'm going to be talking about them in the PowerPoint presentation. I also want to thank Mathis Rogers, who's videotaping this today. Last Tuesday, he came in the afternoon, and when we finished hanging the show, he went around and interviewed me on all the work as a kind of a teaser for today's event. So, and he did a fantastic job. Thank you so much, Mathis. You did a great job. I've been a member of the Capwrock Writers and Illustrators Alliance now for over a year, and I've attended at least 6 meetings with presenters on various topics. Most of the presenters talk about publishing. A few were illustrators. Those publishing books were interested in things like finding about an agent, royalties, sales, self-publishing issues. I'm not here today to help people find a gallery, make sales, publish art, or for financial gain. My career has been primarily about arts education and the managing of nonprofit community arts centers. This is a compressed version of a 2-semester course at the undergraduate level that could be offered at any university in this country or in any art academy or conservatory. So what we're doing today is not about trying to sell or make money or any of those financial aspects of publishing or making art. It's actually informational. It's about what art is. So this is kind of like as I said, a compressed college course is what we're doing, okay? And before we begin on this, the topics that we're going to be focusing on today are visual communication, fine arts, and illustration. Now, the gallery show that's up here, I could have chosen any artist. It didn't have to be my work. This seminar and the information is universally applied to all art. It's because I do art and I'm doing a seminar that I put my art up. But to let you know, it could be any artist, and it would be the same thing. I might adjust a few things as I go along in order to be able to reflect what's in that art, but overall, it would be the same thing. And what I like to do, what I did in my classes that I taught, whether there was a studio class or an art class, is that I try to get the students to get involved in the very beginning in the class. And I like to know more about my students. So what I'm going to ask now is if, and before I do that, let me just make one other comment. During this seminar, there's a little workshop, a drawing workshop. And there are up front, as Kim has said, I put together little drawing tablets that have 2 pages in them, and they're clipped together with a paper clip, and they're up front. There's pencils, and there's also push pins. So if you want to participate, this is voluntary. If you'd like to participate in this drawing exercise, I would welcome you to do that. The other thing is you don't have to be able to draw. As a matter of fact, it's better you don't know how to draw when you do this exercise. This is for anybody, okay? Everybody always talks about, well, I'm not an artist. I can't draw a straight line. Well, you want to draw a straight line? Get a ruler. Art is not about straight lines, okay? And then also people talk about it when they look at certain art they don't understand. They say, well, my daughter can do that. Okay, but you got to do it. Give her some paint, give her a canvas, let her make it, okay? That's what you're going to come across, I hope, from this seminar, is that art making is for everybody. I'm going to repeat this quote later in the seminar. Picasso said, every human being is born an artist. The trick is staying one the rest of your life. That's the hard part, because everything in society is necessitating against you doing that. Everything has to be practical. Everything has to be, you got to get a job, you got to get an education, you got to get a degree, you got to do all this stuff. And that's fine. I mean, that's all wonderful stuff. It makes for a great society. I'm not, denigrating that. But what about the other aspects of life, the emotional, the imagination aspect of life? It actually pervades everything, including the sciences and mathematics. And Jorge can tell you that too, but you need imagination in mathematics. You need imagination in science just as much as you need it in the arts. So what I'm going to ask right now is to kind of engage, like the little workshop we're going to do, that's to engage my students in the audience with me in the process. So what I'd like to do is, if anyone would like to get up and stand up or say something about themselves, about what art they do or what they publish and so on, I'm going to open the floor to that before we get started. Anyone like to begin? Talk about themselves a little bit? Anything. Well, we just already had one presentation, which is good. No, that's fine. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What she did is what I'm saying. So everybody in here is doing something. Yeah.
Part of the Illustrators Watercolor Society.
Oh.
I never got to really do watercolor. That's why I taught. I taught everything on the computer. So it was kind of nice to get my hands on it and let the watercolors splash all over the place. And I certainly don't consider myself good or bad or anything. I just like to express myself. We all have that capacity, and I don't judge myself against other artists in our group. I just go out.
That's exactly what it's all about. That's what I'm looking for. That kind of openness and responsiveness is what I'm looking for. And no prejudging. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to know what I'm looking at and a better understanding of what I'm seeing. I'm not an artist, but I appreciate art. And I appreciate it more when I know something about it, the artist, what he intended, or what people are thinking might have intended. But I've had the chance to see some great pictures, and I had some understanding ahead of that helped.
That's great. That's terrific. Do you publish? Do you do any writing and publishing? Have you published books? No. Okay. That's also great too. That's great. We're going to talk about an author in the field of education, John Holt. John Holt had a PhD in mathematics. His entire life was spent teaching elementary school children mathematics. He said where education is in elementary school. That is vital. We need more people with PhDs and master's degrees saying, I want to teach children, okay? And what it is he saw that they're fresh, they're open, they're ready to experiment, they want to learn things, they want to learn about the world. And John Holt talks about that. So that's exactly what you're saying is what I'm trying to do here today, actually. Anybody else want to say anything? Sure, go ahead.
Sarah, and I'm a web member of the like I said, I know. I'm a poet.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say, and I recently got published in anthology in South Carolina, most of my life. But I was going to say, I love the fact that you said,
yeah. Yeah, well, and this whole conversation today, it's going to focus primarily on visual arts, visual communication, pictorial thinking. However, what I'm saying about that applies to dance, theater, opera, music, poetry, literature. It can be applied to all of those things. It's not just saying that visual art is the only arts. They're all arts. Right. one of the things that I love about education, and after I finish courses or classes I've taught and work with students, and they say things like, you know what, I never knew that. I never understood that. I mean, that to me is a revelation. When somebody says, I've been revealed something I didn't know before, that's huge. That is huge. It's a conversion. It's like changing religions. You don't just shift religions all of a sudden, you know? I mean, conversion takes a lot of work. And the same thing with learning new ideas. It takes work. And then when you finally get it, bingo, the light bulb goes on, and it's great. And that's what I've tried to do in all my teaching and in my artwork. Anybody else? Anyone else? Go ahead, please.
You can put a lot of emotion into the song, and you can put the story into the song.
Well, absolutely, lyrics. I mean, that's poetry. The sister that I illustrate her children's books for, she writes them in rhyme. And every publisher we sent the books to, they say, this is in rhyme. Nobody prints rhyme today. Nobody knows how to write rhyme. You see, and music is about rhyme. It's lyrics, absolutely, no question about it. Choir. Okay, we're going to talk about a choir a little bit later. I managed a choir. Anybody else want to say anything? I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the arts. It can be in the sciences, mathematics, anywhere you think there's creativity. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious.
That's the old thing that parents say, you can't be an artist, you're going to starve to death. No. And there's a book I want to explain to you a little bit later that you might find interesting, in that whole subject about surviving as an artist.
I have a career that is a lot of video.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. You have no idea where the career track is going to take you. Anybody else? Okay, now let's get into the meat of this, all right? And I have to apologize for one thing. A lot of this is going to be extemporaneous, where I like to talk off the top of my head or off the podium, but also, too, there are some quotations that are critical that I need to read. I don't like necessarily to read to people, but when I'm using someone else's words, I like to make sure that they're accurate. So there are portions of this that I'll have to read to you, and I apologize for that, but I think it will add a lot to the whole thing. If you take the outline that I gave you, or that you picked up out front, if anybody doesn't have one, please go pick one up. Okay? When I start all my courses, and this is fairly typical of most teachers, is it's really good to have what I call a roadmap. Where are we going with this course? Okay, what are we looking for? This is prior to whatever it is you're going to actually learn by taking the course. It's as I said, it's a kind of roadmap. Okay, so this little outline is a roadmap of this whole seminar. It's also a roadmap of the artwork that's on the wall. Let me mention something about why I put the artwork up. There are several reasons. When I went to the director and I said, I want to do a show here, she said, well, we're pretty booked up. All I've got is a week. It turned out that week happened to be June with the 14th for this meeting. And I said, well, I went to the president of the board and said, can we do a seminar on this subject, and can we have a show, even though it's only a week? It's not how long the show is up. It's whatever influence it can have. Part of the influence is going to come through the fact that it's being videotaped and being put up online, so more people will be able to see it. So I'm the kind of person to say, I jump on an opportunity. A week, I'll make it work. But I said, that's going to be tough because I got to hang out on Tuesday, take it down on Monday, and then I got to do a seminar on Saturday. So it's compressed, but I think it's going to expand way far beyond just this, okay? So let's take a look at the introduction to the seminar, and I'm going to get into the topic of Rockwell versus Warhol, and it's very important. I'm going to just show you something. I travel the country going to museums and galleries and taking my chances sometimes. I was in Stockbridge, Massachusetts in 2017, and there was a fabulous exhibition at the Rockwell Museum of Art in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. The catalog was fantastic. I just really loved it. And it was called Inventing America, Rockwell plus Warhol. I'm talking Rockwell versus Warhol, for the reason that there's always been a controversy in the arts about the difference between illustration and fine art. And I want to draw there are distinctions, but there are also a lot of overlaps too, and I want to go into that overlap. So there are two quotes that I'm going to repeat several times. And the first one is, what makes a painting a work of fine art as opposed to an illustration? And conversely, can an illustration be considered a work of fine art? So it's like all good philosophers start by posing the question. Children do it. They say, Daddy, Mommy, why is the sky blue? That's actually the beginning of all philosophy, asking a question. Why is something the way it is? Okay. So what we're doing here is we're asking a question, and then we're going to try to work our way through an argument that finds different ways of looking at answers to that question. The second one is the question of representation in art be used as a basis for making the distinction between fine art and illustration. Hopefully during the seminar we'll find out whether or not that distinction can be made. Part two of the seminar is Visual Education in Contemporary Institutions of Learning, the importance of visual education for children. I have taught in the educational system all the way down to first grade, kindergarten, all the way up to graduate school. And I've had wonderful experiences all along the way. But some of the most important experiences have been teaching younger children. My own children, for one thing, because I have my own two children, and also other people's children. I spent 15 years in the poorest community in the United States, the poorest county in the United States, Espanola, New Mexico. I put over 4,000 children through an after-school arts program, which included music, chorus, dance in some cases, visual arts. So visual education is really important, and it's becoming even more important today because we are surfeited with visual images all the time. On the internet, on television, I mean, everything has become so visualized, but we're not educating people how to read the visual. It's just coming at you like a cacophony, like a kaleidoscopic flush. And children aren't being taught to learn how to actually read visually. We teach them how to read words, we teach them how to do mathematics very well, but we don't really teach them how to think and deal with the visual. And it's going to become a lot more critical in the future because it's going to become, the AI and other things coming along the line, it's going to become even more so. I mean, my daughter the other day gave me an AI presentation. It was hysterical. It was the AI program took Jerry Seinfeld and George, turned them into children talking in that little cafe restaurant, and it was hysterical. Okay, well, that's a purely visual experience with the verbal overlay. But we're not in our education system teaching children how to read visually. You have to have trained people to know how to do that. And I was very fortunate to have people in my life who trained me to be that way, all the way down to an uncle who gave me my first drawing lesson, to a great-grandfather who taught himself painting, and I learned from seeing his paintings in my grandparents' home. The third thing is the drawing exercise today. It's going to come about halfway through this seminar, and then we'll also be taking a break so you can have some food and use the restrooms. But that little exercise is purely voluntary, and I'll explain how we're going to do that. It won't take very long, and you're going to have your own exhibition. You're going to be able to pin your drawing up on the wall like my work is on the wall. So I'm making people do what I do, okay? The next thing on the outline is visual perception and pictorial intelligence. There are two authors who have been very influential to me. One is Rudolf Arnheim. The other is Edward Ballard. Arnheim's book, Visual Thinking, is a very powerful book. I recommend it. Principles of Interpretation, how we interpret things visually. Okay? And we're going to do an exercise today that Ballard has in his book. What it is, it's approaching the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. I'm sure many of you have seen that in St. Louis, and he has a whole description of how you approach it, how you see it, how you understand that structure in space. Doing that is visual learning, knowing how to look at that structure in a certain way. Finally, there's organizing visual perception using the grid and the design continuum. The grid system has been used by artists for thousands of years, okay? It's been around forever. The grid system can be projected into space as perspective, for example, or it can be pulled back and pulled right up front. So some of the paintings you see are in a grid, a 4-part grid system that I've been using in some of my artwork. The Design Continuum is a book that I have had since college. It's an approach to understanding visual forms. It's Fisher and Krantz at Syracuse University. Any questions on the outline about where we're going to go? Everybody okay with the roadmap? Okay, the next thing is, when you do research and you're taking ideas from other people, you have to give credit to those people. I'm sure you've seen on TV in the last, 30, 40, 50 years, people who plagiarize at universities, they take things from people, they don't give any credit for it, okay? Anyone who works at a university knows this happens, okay? So saying where you get your, you can have your own original ideas, and I have a lot of my own too, but a lot of those ideas came about because of the authors and the people I interacted with. They gave me a lot of what I know today. So I always want to give credit for where these ideas are coming from. So we're going to run through what I call a suggested reading list. So when you leave this seminar and you want to follow up on this, you can follow up on it by watching the video, which I hope helps. The other is go out and buy these books. Every one of these books you can get on Amazon, every single one, or you can get them at the main library downtown. They're all available, or at Texas Tech University. So one of the first things I do when I go to a new place is I can get a library card. Bam, right away. So I got a library card here in Lubbock, and I got a library card at Texas Tech University. So all those books are totally available to you. The first one I'm going to mention, which I've already said, is Rudolf Arnheim, Visual Thinking. Rudolf Arnheim was born in Germany, and his first love was film. He was a personal friend of Alfred Hitchcock. As a matter of fact, he participated in a lot of the early Hitchcock black and white film noir before he came to the United States. During World War II, being a German Jew, he escaped to New York. In New York, he then got involved with WNET. And at that time, Picasso's Guernica was on display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, because Picasso said that painting will never go back to Spain until Franco is dead. So the painting was in one huge room at the Modern, which I saw when I was a teenager. And the second room was all the individual drawings and studies for that big painting. He did one of the first public TV broadcasts on WNET, in which Arnheim described and talked about that painting and why it's an important painting. I met Rudolf Arnheim at a National Association School of Art and Design meeting conference in Cincinnati. We became friends. He had retired from Harvard University, where he had established the first department of the psychology of art. And all of his writings have a lot to do with the psychology of art. Art and visual perception is one of them. The power of the center is another one. Visual thinking is another one. When I was vice president of the Institute for Humanities Research at Indiana University, I brought him down from his retirement at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor to do a week-long seminar in Indianapolis. I had a wonderful dinner for 3 hours with him at a restaurant. And he signed a number of his books to me, and he told his publisher to send any new book that he puts out. I really identify with Arnheim and his ideas about visual thinking. That's key in this seminar. Principles of Interpretation, I did not know that professor. He was at the university in New Orleans. But his book has been influential to me in terms of being a kind of a pendant to Arnheim's visual thinking. The next one is Marshall McLuhan in 1968 predicted, and we're going to talk about that in a little while, predicted what the future of the 21st century was going to look like. He did this in 1968, long before there was the internet. His book, The Global Village, Transformations in World Life and Media in the 21st Century, got me thinking about why it is that our educational system isn't teaching people how to think visually. We're really good at all the other ways of thinking, but not about thinking visually. The other authors that I'm interested in, this is a little bit on the side, is Pictorial Nominalism with Thierry. It affects more of my work than it does actually this seminar. The other one is Ludwig Wittgenstein, the great Austrian philosopher who taught at Cambridge University several times in his life. His Tractatus Logico Philosophicus and his philosophical investigations had a direct influence on a lot of the artwork that I do. Then there's John Holt, How Children Fail, How Children Learn. When I was at UNM doing my graduate work, I was also teaching at St. Pius High School in Albuquerque, and I was chairman of the art department. And I was taking my licensing requirements to be able to teach in high school and to get a state license. And one of the professors introduced John Holt, and I read his books, and I said, this guy knows what education is all about. The next one is Basic Design Grids. We'll take a look at some of those in the slides. The other is another professor that I met is Harold Taylor, Art and the Intellect. When I was a graduate student, he was president at Sarah Lawrence College in New York. He wrote a book called Art and the Intellect. And I had a really great meeting and encounter with him about his book and about him. This was a long time ago. But his concept of art and the intellect is very powerful. And the next one is the design continuum, which we'll talk about later. Then there's the history of the illustrated book. Since we're talking about the difference between illustration and fine art, I highly recommend, if you want to pursue that idea, the history of the illustrated book is an excellent text. I have a few quotes from the author. Reality through the arts. This is the other thing that I find fascinating, is that whenever you find that you're up against a problem in your field, go back to the basics. Go back to what started you in that field. And sometimes it means getting books like this, which is actually very fundamental. It's all about the visual arts, but it takes you back to materials, methods, techniques, art historical things, color theory, and so on. So I always find that when you get stuck on something, in whatever the field is, go to the basics, because that's where the answer really is going to come from. I already showed you this one here. We'll go back to the Inventing America with Rockwell and Warhol. The other very important book is The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. I have a little test for you later in the seminar about artwork that is mechanically reproduced, which is the major reason why I put the show up, even though you're going to see most of it in digital form on the screen. I want you to visually see the huge difference between the actual work and all these digitized images that are out there every day. Okay? They're not the artwork themselves. They are manufactured. And the book by Benjamin, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which was, actually it came out in the 1940s and has been republished several times. The other one is The View from the Studio Door, How Artists Find Their Way in an Uncertain World, which is what you were talking about, finding your way in an uncertain world. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, I'm going to refer to that because it was illustrated by Salvador Dali. And one of the important things about illustration is that when you're illustrating a text, you should enhance the text, not overwhelm the text. And that particular edition of Alice in Wonderland, illustrated by Salvador Dali, says very little about Carol's book. It says everything about Dali's art. Mastering telepathy, I'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of, in addition to developing our ability to think pictorially and think visually, we also need to think about how we connect with people through our minds. And this is not like superstition or magic or hocus pocus or horoscope stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about the power of the human mind to be able to actually communicate. Our evolution as a species has been going on for millions of years, long before we had all this technology that replaces our ability to communicate as human beings, long before we even had language. Humans were communicating. How were they doing that? If you go to primitive tribes, if you even go to current Native American groups, and you live long enough with them, you start to understand that they have somehow or other that they connect with each other, okay? It's a telepathic ability. The arts are a lot about telepathy, connecting that way. The last book on this list is The Act of Creation by Arthur Koestler. Arthur Koestler had a theory. It's really brilliant. It's called a ha-ha-aha theory, that all creative activity comes out of humor, a laugh, okay? Not slapstick, but real humor. The other is discovery. I found it. The light bulb turned on. So he calls it the ha-ha-aha technique, and that's kind of the basis of creativity. That's applicable to every discipline that human beings exercise, from math to science to mathematics. Read some of the things Einstein said about his use of his imagination in discovering things. Read any of the biographies of great scientists who made discoveries. They all talk about the importance of their imagination and how, like, they fell asleep, they dreamed something, they woke up and they saw this molecular structure, and all of a sudden a whole new theory came out. Arthur Koestler's book I really highly recommend it. Anyone have a question about the books that I've talked about? Maybe you've read them. Some of you have ever read any of those books or know them? The what?
Galaxy Wonderland.
Oh, well, okay. As a matter of fact, the title behind the book that I'm working on is called Occam's Looking Glass. It's based on Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. Anybody want to make a comment on any of those books? Okay, on the beginning of my show, I make an artist statement. That often happens a lot in galleries. You have an artist who will make a statement about their work. And during this seminar, we're going to go through my artwork step by step, and we'll take a look at some of the different things that go on in my artwork. Now I'm going to read a little bit, so I apologize for that. You can read it also. You have a copy of it in your pages there. Images then regard the world in two opposite directions. They hover somewhere above the realm of practical things and below the disembodied forces animating these things. This comes Arnheim's book, Visual Thinking. Paintings and drawings in this portfolio, when I say portfolio, I mean the exhibition on the wall, are derived from an original and singular illustrated manuscript entitled Occam's Looking Glass. The book contains short stories, poems, and essays that are represented by paintings and drawings evoking mirror images in the form of a palimpsest. A palimpsest in the Middle Ages, and I'll talk again about this, is when books were rare and they were handmade before printing was available. Even paper, as we know it, wasn't available. They used vellum and parchment, which are animal skins. That made every one of those illuminated manuscripts that were holed up in monasteries and libraries in Europe in the 11th and 12th centuries more valuable than gold. And when a book was no longer viable, they would scrape off the text and put another book on top. And that's called a palimpsest. And you're going to see some examples of that. A multi-layered composition. And so some of my artwork is kind of a palimpsest, a mirror in multi-layer. Majority of the images are arranged in a four-part grid, which in terms of the paintings are individual canvases that may be reconfigured into a myriad number of relationships. Those canvas panels over there, you can remove them. So if you want to make your own composition, you can move it around, kind of like a Rubik's Cube. So you can participate in the creative process by creating a whole new composition by moving the panels around. The works in question represent both a mirror image and a window. Down in front of everything on those pedestals, what you're going to see is there's a little white frame. It's glass. It's like a window. And it's a parody on a great work of art that's at the Philadelphia Museum of Art in Pennsylvania. It's The Great Glass by Marcel Duchamp. Though next to it is a mirror folded on top of one of my drawings so that you can see it like a kaleidoscope. So visual art is about a window into another world and a mirror reflecting the world that we are in. next thing I want to emphasize on my statement is that William of Ockham was a Franciscan friar, theologian, and philosopher who did his studies and lectured at Oxford University. He lived during the latter part of the 13th and early 14th centuries. Although he's not as well known as his predecessors, Duns Scotus and St. Thomas Aquinas, his work has had a profound impact on the modern world, particularly in the field of logic and natural science. He's known for what's called Occam's razor. You may have heard that. What it means is entities ought not to be multiplied beyond necessity. Up to that time, science, there were all kinds of weird theories circulating around, and there were too many of them. And what he did was he took a razor and he cut it down, and he says, look at the simplest possible solution to the problem. Don't look to the complicated part of the problem. That really started the whole scientific revolution, right there, that one line. It sounds amazing that a single line in Latin in philosophy, and in Latin it says "ensia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem." A single Latin line started the scientific revolution in the modern era. The next thing I want to emphasize is that all that binds together the disparate products and activities we call art are loosely interlocking family resemblances. Morris Weitz, he's a visual arts critic. That is to Wittgenstein as an early application of how his views concerning language might be applied. Wittgenstein's analytical philosophy underlines the artwork created in the book Occam's Looking Glass. In particular, his picture theory of language, which I'll mention later, in the Tractatus, and in his book, The Philosophical Investigations. The rest you can read. I'm not going to read that to you, so you can read my full statement. Now I want to, that's pretty serious stuff, and I just want to kind of break that up with a little bit of humor. You have to also, as Arthur Koestler does, you have to approach art in a humorous way also. Don't always take it so seriously. And there's two little stories that I think kind of highlight that idea. One is that an art dealer, and this story is authentic, bought a canvas signed Picasso, and he traveled all the way to Cannes in southern France to discover whether it was genuine. Picasso was working in his studio. He cast a single glance at the canvas and he said, "It's a fake." A few months later, the dealer bought another canvas signed Picasso. Again, he traveled to Cannes, and again Picasso, after a single glance, granted, "It's a fake." "But dear master," the dealer said, "it so happens that I saw you with mine own eyes working on this very picture several years ago." Picasso shrugged. "I often paint fakes." Perfect. It's absolutely perfect. That's really what the creative art process is all about. We often do fakes of ourselves, too. The next story is, another story concerns the great Spanish surrealist painter, Juan Miró. One time in the Madison Avenue Gallery in New York City, the artist was given a retrospective of his work. The day after the opening, Miró was wandering around the gallery enjoying his creative output. He saw a gentleman standing in front of one of his paintings and noticed he was making notes. Miró went up to him and asked him what he was doing. The man replied that he was a critic for a well-known art magazine. He proceeded to tell Miró what he thought of the painting. The critic did not recognize that it was the artist to whom he was speaking. After patiently listening to the critic, Miró remarked, "I did not realize it put all that in my painting." That's the whole world of art criticism. It often loads up into art more than is really there. Okay. The last thing has to do with AI and maybe the future where all this stuff is going. Viral AI, and I took this off online, it was a news item, viral AI made art trends are making artists more worried about their future. Joy Cadano, an artist, said that she used to get commissioned almost every week to create an anime-inspired art. Now, she said, that work has nearly come to a halt, with many online users seeming to gravitate toward artificial intelligence-made art. That's something that artists are having to face with. Again, I want to go back to Wittgenstein and his picture theory of language. This is very dense, and I'm not going to expect that everyone should have to understand what Wittgenstein has said. To be honest with you, there's a lot of Wittgenstein I don't understand, and I've spent a lot of time reading everyone I can think of to help me understand what he has to say. But these two nuggets are where I have understood what he was talking about in terms of language. His picture theory of language in the Tractatus, he says, the sum total of reality is the world. We picture facts to ourselves. A picture presents a situation in logical space. the existence or non-existence of states of affairs. A picture is a model of reality. The totality of true thoughts is a picture of the world. If a sign is useless, it's meaningless. That's the point of Occam's looking glass. If everything behaves as if a sign had meaning, then it does have meaning. His other theory in the other book, he had two separate theories about philosophy. We can also think of the whole process of using words as one of those games by which children learn their native language, and we'll call these games language games. And we'll sometimes speak of a primitive language game. To imagine a language is to imagine a form of life. We have lives because we have language, because we can communicate. And there are so many ways that we communicate. And the one I'm really interested in is visual communication. I can communicate verbally, I can communicate in writing, I can use words, I can even use mathematical numbers and so on. But for me, the visual is the most powerful thing in my life. Okay, any questions so far? Anybody want me to respond to anything? Clear as mud, right? No, I hope it's clear. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the projector. We're also to go, can you do the lights? No, they need to all be off. All the lights need to be off. The only way you can really clearly see the images. Okay, Occam's looking glass is the exhibit that's on the wall. Everything in that I have subsumed under that one book, okay? Rockwell versus Warhol, that's really the seminar. It's fine art and illustration, visual thinking, visual communication. That's the second part of this. I'm going to repeat the statement that I made in the beginning because I think it's vital. It's really also what this whole thing is about. What makes a painting a work of fine art as opposed to an illustration, and conversely, can an illustration be considered a work of fine art? Is the question of representation in art to be used as a basis for making a distinction between fine art and illustration? Again, I'm going to have to quote from this author because it's a little bit complicated and I want to make sure I get it right. Roger Scruton states in his essay, Photography and Representation, every one of us, because we see photographic images, we think they're real. They are not real. Our brain makes them real. If you stop and look at any image that's on your telephone or your video screen or your computer, you're going to see a jumble of things. And your eye is moving around that screen. Just like you go up to one of my paintings, I make the people who look at my art, I force them to use their eyes in certain ways, and they don't even know it. But I know it. I know that when I painted this, where my eyes were. And I know that people who are looking at it are going to be looking at it in the same way. Critics and philosophers have occasionally been troubled by the question whether the cinema is an independent art form. Independent, that is, of the theater from which it borrows so many conventions. The question can be traced back to a more basic one. The question whether photography is capable of representing anything. This is heretical, what I'm saying here. It does not, and he says the same thing. I shall argue that it is not, and insofar as their representation in film, the origin is not photographic. We are not seeing the real. We are seeing illusions. We are living in an illusionistic world, and that world is getting more and more illusionistic. Without going into politics, that's why the debate on a national, international level about politics is so confused and so divisive and so difficult, because the media through which this information is coming is all visual, and nobody can read it right. Nobody can see it right. It seems odd to say that photography is not a mode of representation, for a photograph has in common with a painting the property by which painting represents the world, the property of sharing in some sense the appearance of a subject. Photography might even be thought to have replaced painting as a mode of visual representation. Painters have felt that if the aim of painting or an illustration is to reproduce the appearance of things, then painting must give way to whatever means are available to reproduce an appearance more accurately. No, we don't. We can simply paint. We can simply draw. We can simply sculpt. We can dance. We can write. We can write with our hand, with a pen or a pencil. Now we can take a look at some of the slides. This is the book that I told you about, John Harthane, and I have a very important quote from his book. This is a page from his book. It's a modern illuminated letter in a manuscript. The medieval manuscripts were hand illuminated, even with gold leaf. These are pages from an illuminated manuscript, illustrations in a medieval book. This is a palimpsest. There's at least 4 books on that page. Now, with the current scientific methods, they can actually separate those layers, like they did with the Dead Sea Scrolls, where they can separate through and they can read the lettering. So these old books can now be read. And the reason that they're this way is because of cost. They could not possibly produce a number of books that were needed at the time. There's another palimpsest. Another one. You can see the shading underneath. This is Salvador Dali's illustration of the Alice in Wonderland, the 100th anniversary. This is the book I already mentioned to you, Inventing America, Rockwell and Warhol. I discovered something in this exhibit, a couple of things that were really important to me, and it's why I bring it into this seminar. I'm actually going to give you the answer to what is illustration and fine art the same. The one genre that brings the two together is portraiture. Portraiture brings illustration and fine art together. Think of the one portrait that everybody knows, the Mona Lisa. It's like the symbol of what art is supposed to be. Well, what is it? It's a portrait. For a long time, portraiture was seen as a subsidiary art. It wasn't accepted in the same way as illustration in the 20th century was seen as a secondary art to abstract expressionism, which it wasn't. So one of the things I learned about Warhol and Rockwell was the cover of that catalog. That's Jackie Kennedy when her husband was inaugurated. That's a Jackie Kennedy by Warhol as a silkscreen the day he was assassinated. Portraiture as illustration, portraiture is fine art. So if you're looking for an answer, what makes fine art, you can look at portraiture as one way to see it that way. John Harthane in his book says, illustration may be approached from different viewpoints. One is to study the technique used. This is a valuable exercise, but to concentrate on technique and to look at illustrations primarily as graphic art is to ignore, this is important, the complex relationship between picture and text. One of the things that has interested me in art is that relationship between picture and text, which is why one of the paintings I brought in, you see there's 2 phrases. There's 2 portrait heads, and then there is the red violet and the blue-green. So the word, image, and text combination together is important. So if you're an illustrator and you're illustrating a book, you need to know what the text is. You need to understand it if you're going to illustrate it properly. Or when you're actually doing your own art, you're actually working in a language that sometimes includes the verbal language. The whole historical social hinterland from which books emerge. Book illustration is like a hand mirror in which one can see reflected great historical scenes, social change, and the movement of ideas through the century. Book illustration has always been concerned with communication. It has to interpret or to amplify a text, a function which it distinguishes from painting and sculpture. Now we see the distinction. Distinction is the amplification of a text. Whereas fine art painting doesn't necessarily have to amplify anything other than itself. That's why I point out about the Dali book as overwhelming the text. This has also been disastrous in establishing a too strong demarcation between painting and illustration. An example of an effort to break it down was this exhibition in Stockbridge. Also, the other revelation was that Andy Warhol's younger brother was a children's book illustrator, and they devoted a whole room to Andy Warhol's brother's illustrations. The other thing is that Andy Warhol went to Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh. They attended that before it became Carnegie Mellon University. Philip Holstein and Andy Warhol were classmates. They graduated, they went to New York City in the early 50s to pursue their art career. Phil Holstein was a friend of mine. I knew Phil. He's a great figure painter. When Andy Warhol got to New York, the first thing he did was employ himself in fashion magazines, designing shoes. This got him into the whole Hollywood entertainment world, okay? And all of his work then started taking on commercial aspects like Campbell soup cans. So the point is the Campbell soup can a piece of fine art, or was it an illustration for the Campbell Soup Company? The next thing I want to talk about is the book, A Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And this lends itself to what I was saying earlier about how we have so few, we're not teaching children in our schools how to think and read visually. The work of art, and I'm going to use an example about art and fine art. There's only one Da Vinci painting in all of the Americas, and it's in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. It's a portrait of Ginevra da Vinci. I've seen it, I've sketched it, I've drawn it, I've photographed it. There are several Da Vinci drawings in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York collection. The collection has 21,000 drawings, 1.2 million prints, 12,000 illuminated books on rotating display in a corridor between the Renaissance collection and 19th century European art. There are 2 Da Vinci paintings in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg in Russia. I've seen both of those at the Hermitage in Russia. I saw them, I photographed them, I drew from them. The director of the Hermitage once said, "One can divide all the museums of the world on those that possess paintings by Leonardo and those that do not." There are 125 Vincent van Gogh paintings in museums in the United States. My question to you is, raise your hand, how many have actually seen a real Da Vinci? Very good, very good. How many have seen a Vincent van Gogh? Almost equal. That's not bad. That's an educated audience. Usually when I ask that question, there's very few that have seen a Da Vinci. Most have seen a Van Gogh. My point, again, being the reason why I put my artwork up. I could have done this seminar without my artwork. I could have done it with a PowerPoint presentation. But from my point of view, the only way to make this effective is that you actually see the work itself to make that point. Okay, now what we're going to do is I call this my portfolio, so we're going to go rapidly through the portfolio, which you can also see yourself. And then we're going to do the drawing exercise, and then you can get some refreshments, and I have a concluding portion to the seminar. You can see these on the wall already. Actually, this particular composition is different than the one that's up there. I removed some of the panels. This is all part of the grid system that I use. This is a very early one that I did many years ago that led me in the direction that I am right now. These are studies. They're called grisaille. In French, it means to do a study in black, white, and gray tonality, and then paint on top of that in color. So these are both color and black, white, and gray studies for larger paintings. I have 400 or 500 sketchbooks filled with drawings, and sometimes I take them out and I frame them and I show them. These are some of those sets. This is an internal page of the book that's over there, the Occam's Looking Glass. On the left side you see a text, and on the right side you see the layers, the palimpsest layers. They're actually transparent sheets that have been photocopied from one of my drawings and my paintings, and I put them on top of the text that I write. I'm also very interested in film, and this is by Elaine Renee. It's called Last Year at Marienbad. You can see some of the paintings over there. I have my DVD, and I photograph from it, and then I work from that. And then I take some of the script out of the film and put it like subtitles, but not necessarily with that particular frame. The 2 characters that are the main characters in that film, there's a line that says, "He's seen some danger, probably." Now, what I want you to do is to make a connection between the words and the image. You must be making a mistake. And I've done illustrations for literary works. This is T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. These are my interpretations of his poetry. Again, I try to do illustrations that enhance his poetry, don't overwhelm it. All the images in those there come directly out of the verbal images in the poem. This is the book that Jorge Morales and I are working on. It's called The Fly in the Bottle. We're doing an interpretation of the largest fresco mural in the world. It's by Giambattista Tiepolo. It's in the Würzburg Treppenhaus in Würzburg, Germany. And we're doing an interdisciplinary study between the arts, the sciences, and music and theater. And I mean, it's just incredible what we're working on. But this is a cover page to that, what we hope will end up being a book. These are my illustrations for that book. I'm also working on a illustrated autobiography. It's called Thrice Told Tales. On my mother's side of the family, we're distantly related to Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author of Scarlet Letter and the author of The House of Seven Gables in Salem, Massachusetts, which I visited many times. And this is kind of a memorial to a cousin. When he was first writing, he couldn't get his stories published. After so many years, he started publishing, and the editor said, "Why don't you take all your earlier stories, put them under one cover, and we'll call it Twice Told Tales." So I'm calling this Thrice Told Tales. These are all illustrations from my life. I'll just run rapidly through that. I don't want to spend too much time. You can see them on the wall later. We moved to California in 1953, and Disney was becoming big. As a matter of fact, I had the great experience of going with my parents to Anaheim and actually watching the original Disneyland being built. I saw the Earth movies going on. Then years later, I went to Disneyland, and Anaheim was not Anaheim. At that time, it was all orange and citrus fruits orchards. This is the town I was born and raised in, Watertown, Connecticut. This is the home I grew up in. These are my maternal grandparents, aunts, uncles. These are my father's family. They're immigrants from Russia. This is my grandfather and grandmother, Dmitri and Helen Werenko. My great-grandfather taught himself painting. His job was a professional chauffeur for a very wealthy family in Watertown, Connecticut. And he joined a painting group in Waterbury, and they taught each other painting. So I grew up looking at my great-grandfather's paintings. Then my uncle came along, and he took a correspondence course in drawing at Westport, Connecticut, famous artist school, and he gave me my first drawing lesson. This is a George Washington by my great-grandfather. When we were children, we'd run up to my grandparents' home, and the George Washington was on the wall. See, this is this encounter with real art when you're a child, which teaches you how to think visually. We used to yell up at the painting, "Hi, George!" George was real to us. Like, George was not a picture on a computer. George was a painting. You could go up, you could touch, you could feel the texture. It had this beautiful gold rococo frame around it. This is one of my great-grandfather's paintings. It was the back lots behind my grandmother's home where we used to play. This was Christmas in my home growing up with all my 7 brothers and sisters and my mom and dad. My sister writes children's books. She lives in Tennessee. These are her books. They're called The Elf and the Tree, and she asked me to illustrate them. That's her house in Tennessee, with her granddaughters come down from New York City to visit her, and she writes these stories for her granddaughters. Her husband built a tree fort, which one part of the story happens to be about a pirate. And so he built this thing where they go up in the loft of the rigging of the ship, and they're pirate kids. That's my sister when she was 5 and me when I was 13. She almost died from pneumonia. She spent a month in the hospital. When she got out, I was taking art classes at the time, and I carved a little wooden angel for her. So we call her books Little Angel Books. The other book I've worked on for the last 8 years is an art history college textbook on the female form in art. If you go to museums all over the world, you're going to notice the predominance of women images in art. It's huge. It's everywhere. So I did a study going back 20,000 years up to the present of women in art. But I did it from the point of view of like commercial art, illustration art, and fine art. And so I did it from a fine art perspective and from the pinup, which is the magazine of the 20th century where women used to pose for men when they were in the military in World War II. So it's called Classic Pinups Through the Ages. The reason I chose that for advertising reasons is sex sells. I mean, you title something like that, you're going to probably be able to sell a book. But it actually has a lot of importance behind it. It's not silly. These are images. I went to 32 museums in Europe and the United States and did original drawings that are all in the book. There are 328 illustrations, 12 paintings of famous, a model that I had and famous models of the 20th century posed with my model. These are all from the museums that I visited. You can see them on the wall. That's Salvador Dali's rendition of the Venus de Milo with drawers. I worked at a foundry where we cast this sculpture by Gaston Roches. This is a display in the corner. It shows you how I make the drawings and paintings. I work from a model, I do photographs, I sketch from the model, and then I come up with a composition, and then I do underpainting, overpainting, glazing, until you get to the final color version of the painting. These are live sketch from models. These are the paintings. There are 12 paintings in there, and I'll tell you the name of the models are Diana Dors, June Wilkinson, Jane Mansfield, Anita Ekberg, Ava Gardner, Taffy O'Neill, Sophia Loren, Betty Brosmer, Betty Grable, Betty Page, Marilyn Monroe, and Bridget Bardot. They're all in the 12 paintings that represent classic female figures in the 20th century. Sophia Loren, Betty Brosmer. Now, this is an illustration that I contributed to the anthology that the CWIA published. It's Under Lubbock Skies, and I provided them with an illustration for that. But since I've been here in Texas, I thought it was important to do that. Okay. And just before we do this little exercise, I want to do a little bit on education. In this slide, the top one, it may not be very clear, but it shows children in kindergarten or preschool. And one of the things that we do, we start children learning. We start them off with, let me get this right quote. It's curious that we start children learning in preschool and kindergarten by using crayons, paints, clay, colored blocks with numbers and letters. Then suddenly the student enters first grade and all that disappears. So you jump from that top picture into all these rows. What people don't realize, the reason the education system that we have today actually came about between 1890 and 1929, when there was a huge influx of immigrants from Russia and Central Europe. And they needed to educate people quickly to put them into factories. Our our elementary and high school education is actually based on a factory model, and we've never changed from that factory model. And we're living in a whole different world, and we need a whole different education system. I'll talk about Global Village. So this is how children learn, how children fail. He introduced the Cuisenaire rods into his classes to teach them about mathematics, color. This is Harold Taylor's The Art and the Intellect that I mentioned to you earlier. One of the things that impressed me about Harold Taylor was that he said that art is experience. You need to experience art to appreciate art. It's not enough just to talk about it. One of the things that John Holt said, and he has 4 points when teaching children and learning something new. Forget your assumptions, delay your judgment, have an open mind, and be patient. The exercise we're going to do in the drawing right now is, I want to skip ahead a little bit, is based on a book by a woman named Betty Edwards. Well, before I do that, I just want to show you, I ran this arts program that I mentioned earlier in Espanola, New Mexico. These are slides from that program. We had a newsletter. We had children. I renovated an old post office into an education center, and we put 4,000 children over an 8-year period after school throughout the year, including summer, ages from 6 to 13. I designed a T-shirt for the children. They lived 30 miles from one of the most important operas in the world, the Santa Fe Opera. None of them have ever been there. I worked out a program with the educational program with Andrea Fellows Walters, and we took them to operas in the summertime. We did tailgate dinners with children, and we had the T-shirts. We actually did a performance on the grounds in their outdoor theater at the opera. These are children and parents who had never been to the Santa Fe Opera, and they were only 30 miles away. That's them after a performance at the Santa Fe Opera. We did art events on the plaza. They were multicultural. We did DVDs and CDs. I had a music teacher from the University of New Mexico School of Fine Arts come up and actually have the children write an opera. It was called City Kitty Picnic. We also received the USDA grant to offer a course, a business arts course at Northern New Mexico College, which I co-taught with another artist friend of mine. This is Betty Edwards' book that we're going to do her exercise with. She came to the Heron School of Art where I was to promote her book, and I had a chance to meet her. And I really think her exercise is important. So if someone could get the lights for me, we'll do that exercise, because we certainly are running on time. Okay, anyone who wants to participate in this, it won't take very long. Do this, seat yourself opposite another person. Find somebody else to seat yourself against so you can look at them and they can look at you. What we're going to do is portrait. So just turn your chair so that you can face another person who wants to do the same thing, okay? Okay, everybody ready? Okay, now let me follow the instruction. Here's the studio teacher giving you the instructions, okay? If you are right-handed, use your left. If you're left-handed, use your right. If you're ambidextrous, use the hand you use the least. Okay? If you're ambidextrous. You have to look at the other person, take the pencil. You start by first doing the outline around their head. Do the outline around their head. Then move inside the face with your opposite hand. Now, it's got to be your opposite hand. I'll explain why. So put a line around, make a line around the head. Whatever shape you see, try to copy that shape with your opposite hand. Then go inside that oval and start to put in the features. You can start with the eyes, you can start with the nose, you can start with the mouth, wherever you want to start, and then move on from there. But make sure that the sketch fills the page. Not in the middle. Fill the page with the image. Yeah, with your non-usable hand. That's what this is. Let me tell you something. What we're doing here is you're activating the other part of your brain that you don't normally use. This is the part we're not teaching children. You're going to do 2 drawings. Okay. Who are you looking at? Her, okay.
I know her from memory.
Well, okay.
You sometimes paint from memory, right?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I paint a lot from memory. Okay, while you're doing that, to save time, I'm going to read a couple of things about what we're accomplishing here. The purpose of, you can just hear me, you don't have to react to me. The purpose of the exercise, nearly all the participants experience some confusion or conflict while doing the exercise. A few people experience a great deal of conflict, even a moment of paralysis. The conflict maybe have been so great that you could not make your hand move the pencil to begin the drawing. The purpose of the exercise is to create conflict so that each person can experience in their own mind the crunch that can occur when a person alters the way he or she uses the opposite hand and reverses the image to being an upside-down mirror image. When you've finished the drawing, put your name at the bottom and the number 1. Print your name at the bottom and the number 1. Or you can use your regular hand for that. Yeah, you can use your regular hand to do the printing. Okay, has everybody finished that? Okay. By the way, everything you're experiencing right now, this summarizes this entire seminar. This is what the whole seminar is about. In spite of all the heady talk. Okay, you put your name and the number 1. No, use your normal writing hand. Use your normal writing hand. Use your normal writing hand to print your name and put the number 1. When you finish that, take that drawing, turn it upside down. You're going to copy that drawing on the next page using the opposite hand. Yes, no, the least dominant. The hand you don't use. Turn the first drawing you did upside down, and then take the other page and redraw that drawing upside down with your opposite hand. Upside down. Well, not with your good hand. No, with your opposite hand, with your non-usable hand.
Still with the same non-usable.
The same thing. What you're doing is you're copying it upside down. No, your opposite hand. Copy the upside image. Okay, copy the upside image. Put it like on your lap. You can do it that way. Put it on your lap, and then just copy the first drawing. Okay, you're going to take the first drawing, turn it upside down. You're going to take the other blank page. You're going to copy that drawing, the first one, but you're copying it upside down with your other hand.
Leave it right side up to look at it.
No, don't just look at it upside down. Copy it. Keep it upside down and copy it. Copy it with your non-dominant hand. Copy it with your non-dominant hand that's upside down. By the way, did you ever wonder why mirrors reflect you left, right, but not up, down? Mirrors don't show you up, down. They don't flip you over, okay? But you know what? In your retina, when you look at the world, you're seeing the world upside down. Your brain turns the image in your retina right side up. So what you're doing is you're playing with the retina in your eye at the same time as you're playing with your brain. By the way, this is the kind of exercise that children should be taught in order to learn how to read visually. And when you finish that, put your name at the bottom, put the number 2. When you finish, put your name in the bottom with your good hand, your regular hand. And then take the 2 push pins you have and put it up on the wall. Now, you put them, turn them so they're both the same, okay? So bring it back up again, but make sure you've identified the second one. Make sure you've identified the second one as the second one, okay? Let me see. See, she didn't, I said fill the page. You didn't fill the page, okay? I said fill the page. Yes, fill the page. This is one of the big mistakes that people make when they start art. They do little tiny things in the middle of the page. You got this huge page, fill it up. So make sure you put your name at the bottom and the second one, and put the number 2. Then put them both right side up and tack it to the wall. You can look at them afterwards, okay? Put them side by side, right side up, with the 2 numbers, 1 and 2. It should stick. Yeah, side by side, number 1, number 2. Let me take a look. Cool. I'm going to show you some of her examples too.
Okay. You want to side by side?
Get some pins. Hey, Jorge, here's the pins. Put them right there. Put them right there. If you need your pins, they're right here. Now, I'm not the only one with a show.
Right side up.
Yeah, both right side up. Put you both right side up. This is number 2.
Wasn't I supposed to draw them upside down?
You did. You drew them upside down, but just put them back this way so you can see the 2. And the way you know the difference is because you're number 1 and number 2.
Okay.
So this was done second. It was a copy of that.
And I copied.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Jorge, how's it going?
Very good.
Very good. Let me see. Fantastic. I'm going to show you some of her examples from her classes. Okay, when you're done that, take your seat so I can finish up, okay? I need to finish up. Hey, Chris, could you get the lights?
I'll wait till everyone sits down.
Okay. Afterwards, when you're getting snacks, you can go through the gallery and take a look at everything, okay? Make sure you put 1 and 2 side by side, right side up.
I knew a person sketch with both hands.
Oh, yeah. There are people who lose their hands and sketch with their feet. Oh, no, it's possible. Oh, yeah, you can do it. Okay, take your seats, and we're going to finish up so we can have some snacks before we have to leave. You'll be able to go through the gallery before you leave today. Here's a page of examples of what Betty Edwards did in her book. And by the way, this kind of exercise is normal for most art teachers. They do this all the time. Betty taught high school art for years, and then she decided to do this book. And in it, she put a lot of the exercises that most art teachers teach from. So this is one of those exercises that helps to develop the brain. The more you do it, the stronger and stronger your ability gets. So if you look up here, you'll see there's center images that were done by the same person, and then after going through numerous exercises, look at what she was able to develop with them from the original drawings. So if we could continue this class, I would keep giving you these different assignments. There's an important point about portraiture, which I mentioned earlier about the gap between illustration and fine art. What you did were portraits, okay? Face recognition is one of the most powerful examples of pictorial intelligence. Ludwig Wittgenstein, the great Cambridge University analytical philosopher, claimed that language operates in the same way as family resemblances. How do you know a person belongs to I'm sure you've had this experience. You didn't even know the family. But you see the person, you met a family member and say, well, they've got to be related. Language is like that. Language is like face recognition. So doing this little exercise, it may seem awkward and difficult. Maybe some of you felt better about it, or some felt worse about it, but it's an important exercise to exercise a different part of your brain. Again, there's a lot here. As I told you, this is a two-semester course, but I'm trying to cram in here. Marshall McLuhan, in his book, The Global Village, which I mentioned earlier, let me just run back to that. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you earlier. This is the original computer. Okay. This is what you did today. You threw away all that technology and you said, okay, let's do what we know we did when we were kids. Remember what I said earlier? If you want to deal with a problem, go back to the basics. Start from the basics. Even if you're an advanced mathematician, sometimes you have to go back to basics in order to get through a problem. Okay? So at the one end you have, the point is print, delete with the eraser, reboot with your sharpener. That's what you did today. The Global Village, it's too complicated to go in right now, but I just want to mention this. In this thing, he talks about the right brain, left brain, and what's going on in our world today. It's important to get this out. Let me find it. Sorry, it's earlier on. By the way, John Holt, in the books I mentioned earlier, he learned to draw from Betty Edwards' book. He had been a musician, and he always wanted to learn to draw, and he found that book. In the Global Village, and this is another key element of what I was saying earlier, how we are not teaching our children how to be visually literate, and they're being confused by all of the visual imagery that's being thrown at them 24/7, okay? In the Global Village, Marshall McLuhan in 1968, look at that year, says, what may emerge as the most important insight of the 21st century is that man was not designed to live at the speed of light. Without the countervailing balance of natural and physical laws, the new video-related media, this is long before the internet, the new video-related media, he says, will make man implode upon himself as he sits in the informational control room, whether at home or at work, receiving data at enormous speeds, imagistic, sound, or tactile from all areas of the world. The results will be dangerously inflating and schizophrenic. We're becoming a schizophrenic society. The only way out of it is the arts. If we bring the arts into our education system, we bring it into our society more, we can be a countervalence against the impact of this technology. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Luddite of the 18th century going around smashing technology. Technology is great, it's wonderful stuff. We're just not adapting to it properly. That's the problem. The person in this video room, his body will remain in one place, but his mind will float out into the electronic void, being everywhere at once in the data bank. Every time we pick up the phone, every time we look at a computer screen, we are in a data bank. We are not in the real world. We are in an illusionary world. Art can pull us back into that real world. Okay. again, it's very difficult to have to go into this right now, but I'm going to try to do the best I can in the little time that we have. In visual thinking, Rudolf Arnheim, he talks about something important about language and visual things. For example, you take the word saw, S-A-W. It's made up of three signs, the S, the A, the W. It acquires different meanings in its usage or becomes a symbol. For example, and every one of you who are writers and publishers are dealing with this. The sentence, he saw her walking toward him. The man went to Lowe's to buy a saw. The carpenter will saw the wood. Same word, totally three different applications. The same thing is going on in the visual imagery that you see over here. The same language is being used, but not verbally. You have to teach people how to read that. Interesting little story. It may take a powerful and prolonged effort to endow a simple design with a particular meaning. Even the most determined indoctrination may not exclude unwelcome associations. This is from a story. I remember when Hitler visited Mussolini's Rome and the whole city was suddenly covered in Nazi flags, and a little Italian girl exclaimed in horror, "Rome is crawling with black spiders!" The swastika for her was interpreted as a black spider. That's visual thinking. Okay, now briefly, this is there's an image scale that I just can't get into it. It's too complicated. I'm sorry. Briefly, it's this. If you want to understand visual art, you have to look at it from a scale. The scale is called the mimetic scale. Mimesis is a Greek word. It means to imitate or copy. So you have mimetic and you have non-mimetic. The use of the word abstract art is a misnomer because all arts are an abstraction. To call one form of art abstract is to do disservice to the word abstract. The better term is to refer to art as being mimetic and non-mimetic. And I'm going to show you some images that go along that scale. This is by Chuck Close. It's actually a painting. Looks like a photograph. It's a self-portrait. That's at the total mimetic end of the scale. This is Mondrian. This is at the total other end of the non-mimetic of the abstract scale. Most art is actually done in between the two. This is by, it's called the Grand Odalisque by Ang, and I want to show you how this has been transformed. This is a Grisaille study of the same painting, which is actually in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This is my copy of the head, the portrait of the woman in the painting. This is my recomposition of that painting into a grid. This is Picasso's interpretation of that painting using the Cubist visual language. Cubism is a visual language in itself. Again, too complicated to get into right now, but this is an interesting book on telepathy that I would recommend that you look up. This is from Ballard's book, Visual Interpretation. He walks you through the process. Another part about visual art is people don't understand that space is actually tangible. When architects design buildings, they're actually not concerned with the bricks, the mortar, the steel, the glass, and the rest of it. That's all extraneous. What they're doing is enclosing space in a certain way. And they use those materials to manipulate that space as though it could be physically touched. So when you're drawing and painting, you're actually using you're working with an illusionary space. In his book, he talks about walking or how you approach this particular large object, assuming for a moment you don't know what it is. It's a catenary arch. It also has symbolic meaning. It's supposed to be called the gateway to the West. So it has symbolic meaning, literary meaning, and visual meaning. Okay. The last couple things I want to mention is there's something called the Muller-Lyer illusion. Because we're in a society today where mathematics, computation, geometry is what we believe is all fact and truth. But the fact is that our senses and our perceptual senses give us another truth that's just as real as a mathematical truth. One of the examples is the Muller-Lyer. If you look at that image at the top, the two lines between the arrows are actually the exact same size. The only way you actually could prove it is by putting a ruler to it. But your eye is telling you that one is larger than the other. That doesn't make it false. That just makes it a perception. And that perception is real. This is a whole book on the grid system, which I can't possibly go into. It would take too long. I just want to mention that the grid is about organizing information. If I were to offer a course actually to children, I would bring this down. One of my intentions when I was teaching full-time was I love being able to take complicated ideas and make them simple enough for a child to understand. That to me is what education is really about. It's not about proving to other people you know so much. It's how you can take what you know and bring it down to a level where anybody can understand it. So this is how to read grids, and this is what I would teach somebody looking at video screens or any of those other devices that we use today. Sorry about how quickly I have to go through this, but we're running out of time. The last thing I want to show you is something called the design continuum. When you go into a museum, what you're going to see, because it's art historically based, art historians and curators design museums. They design them historically, sometimes by movements of art, the Baroque, for example, or the Renaissance, or whatever, or the Rococo, or modern, whatever. Okay, that's one way of organizing visual information, but it's not the only way. You could organize the Metropolitan Museum of Art around a whole different system. And this is the system I'm going to show you. If you went into the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and you organize it according to this system, you put all works of art that use lines in one room. You use all works of art that use texture in one room, or sculptures that use texture. You do all sculptures that are monolithic and large, you put them all in one room, irrespective of their history. If you want history, put a little plaque down there and let people read the history. But the art is actually organized by what it is, not by the history that's behind it. That's not the art. The history is not the art. That's history. So the design continuum, which was developed at the Syracuse University, if you could see an animated version of the design continuum, it would start out as lines at the top. If you made a little flip book, you could, like when you're a little kid, you make a little rocket take off on a little flip book. Well, you could do that with this design continuum. And it goes through a series of images, and I'm going to show you those images. At the top, this is a series on wood. So you're organizing photographically within a certain context how that image represents a certain aspect of the design continuum that you want to organize the visual world that you live in. So you start off with lines, and then textures and wood, and then it turns into a mass, and then it's called the monolithic mass. Then the monolithic mass gets dissolved and turned into planar forms, and then planar forms turns into the branches. So it goes from line to line, two-dimensional to three-dimensional line, and the passage through that goes through a series of forms. They're sculptural in that sense. This is a color version of the same design continuum. These are on two-dimensional planes. These are color lines. Some of these are actually aerial photographs of land markations. Then you look at texture. As the surface starts to build up, you get textural form. Textural form then starts to eat away at the form, and you start to get high relief and mass. Then you get what's called sculpture in a base. Things rise up off a base. Then the form becomes solid, like human beings standing in a crowd, individual forms. This is called monolithic mass. These are called planar forms. These are planar linear forms. So you've gone the full continuum from two-dimensional linear to three-dimensional linear, and you went through these passages. You can organize an entire museum that way, and it would give you a whole different understanding of the artwork, rather than running through a bunch of rooms reading plaques that say, Rubens, date, da-da-da-da. That's all fine for historians, but it really isn't fine for really knowing what art's about. And that's the end of what I have to conclude. So thank you very much.